I have maintained through this series, on both the historical and theological grounds, the doctrine of creation can be regarded as the basis of Christian theology. I shall now state two complementary truths concerning the doctrine and then consider God's purpose in creating the world. The truths are these. On the one hand, God's act in creating the world and His motive in creating are mysteries that no human mind can comprehend. On the other hand, although they are thus supra-rational, they are not irrational. First, God's act of creating the world is a mystery. There is no finite parallel to creation ex nihilo, or to the manner in which God indwells His creatures. Hence, we cannot comprehend God's creativity. A fortiori, we cannot comprehend His asyatas, and self-existence from which His creativity proceeds. Immanuel Kant wrote impressively on this in the following words that convey, in a philosophical mode, a sense of the numinous, unconditional necessity which, as the ultimate support and stay of all existing things, is an indispensable requirement of the mind, is an abyss on the verge of which human reason trembles in dismay. Even the idea of eternity, terrible and sublime as it is, does not produce upon the mental vision such a feeling of awe and terror. For although it measures the duration of things, it does not support them. Yet although God's creativity and asyatas are supra-rational, belief in them is not irrational. On the contrary, although we cannot comprehend them, we can understand that they represent a finite and absolute modes, forms of personal being and activity that we possess only in finite and relative modes. If we can partially create through actualizing the potentialities of given matter, it is reasonable to believe in a God who can create ex nihilo. Again, if we are partially independent of our background and environment, we can reasonably believe that God is wholly independent of everything. The same principle can be applied to the concepts of power and knowledge. If we are able to do some of the things that lie within the scope of human nature, we can reasonably postulate the existence of a God who can do everything that is in accordance with divine nature. And if we are able to know some of the things that are knowable, we are reasonably postulate the existence of a God who can know everything that is knowable. Throughout, we posit a divine activity that, so far from being incompatible with finite activities, is their infinite completion. The same complementary truths emerge from a consideration of God's motive in creating the world. God, being self-sufficient, does not need anyone or anything. Hence, if He is good, His motive for creating the world must be pure generosity. In other words, He must be motivated by a form of love that is wholly altruistic. This too is a mystery. There is no finite parallel to love without need. Even when a human person performs altruistic acts of love, they still minister to his needs in the sense that if he did not perform them, he would not be fully human. On the human plane, charity is a necessary form of self-realization. God, however, would be fully divine even if He had not created the world on which He bestows His love. Yet the attribution of creative love to God is not irrational. It conforms to the same principle that operates in the attribution of creative power to Him. Although we cannot comprehend such love, we can rationally postulate it because we can understand it sufficiently to see that it constitutes an absolute mode of a spirituality that we can exhibit only within a finite mode. Infinite love is not incompatible with finite love. On the contrary, it fulfills all that finite love at its best contains. It constitutes a pure expression of an altruism that human act can only partially amplify. However, to say that God does not need the world does not imply that He does not delight in it. On the contrary, He is bound to delight in it if He is its creator, and if He is love. Hence, we must proceed by analogy with the created order. If every human creator delights in the limited works they create, how much more must God delight in the universe that He creates ex nihilo? Also, if we delight in what we love, how much more must God delight in what He loves with complete selflessness? We can bring creativity and love together in the form of the following analogical inference. If two parents delight in a child whom they procreate as a result of a love for each other, that is indistinguishable from their need of each other, how much more must God delight in a world that He created out of an absolute pure love from which all need is absent? A consideration of God's motive in creating leads to the following question. Is God's act in creating free or necessary? It is both in ways appropriate to His infinite being. It is free insofar as He is not obliged to create through an external constraint or in order to fulfill His nature. But it is not free in the sense that He could have chosen not to create. Similarly, it is not necessary in the sense that without it His nature would be incomplete. But it is necessary insofar as it is necessary expression of His nature. If God exists, I say, all His acts must constitute as inevitable and wholly adequate expressions of His being. They must take the form of a spontaneous overflowing into finitude of what He infinitely is within Himself. The same truth can be approached by the type of analogical reasoning I have used. Even on human plane, acts of love are ideally spontaneous. They are, ideally, the necessary expression of the agent's goodness. To say that a person is free not to perform such an act is to say that he is free to sin, either negatively through refraining from the act when it is within his power, or positively by performing an unloving act. The perfect freedom at which we ought to aim is not the ability not to love, but the inability to do anything that does not exhibit love. Hence, to deny spontaneity to God's creative love is to deny that He reaches even the ideal that is set for His creatures. Yet the difference between God and His creatures remains. Only He is self-existent being, can by a necessary of His own nature perform an act of love that adds nothing to His own perfection, but is performed solely for the benefit of others. What I have said concerning God's creative love is not merely a piece of abstract speculation. It It affects the very basis of religion. The basis is worship. Now, worship implies first that God is our Creator, and secondly, that He does not merely exemplify human ideals, but also surpasses them. That than which nothing greater can be conceived. Surely nothing greater can be conceived than the love of a God who created the world, although He had no need of it at all.